So, wanted to revisit some of the work that we did in the beginning of this unit, where I showed you a couple of sample spreadsheets. I was poking around quickly to show you maybe some of the things we could do with spreadsheets. And I said later on that maybe we could come back to this to see exactly what was going on in those spreadsheets. I think you know enough now, and we've talked about enough functions where you can now understand a little bit more about what exactly we did in those spreadsheets. So I want to go back to two of the spreadsheets we talked about previously and maybe see if you can understand a little bit more about what's going on here. Okay. So this first spreadsheet here was the spreadsheet that we had used to try to tabulate the homeroom t-shirt sizes for the walkathon. And if you remember this, we had a spreadsheet here that we were collecting the t-shirt sizes in. Let me just zoom out on this. Right. So this particular spreadsheet, or this tab of the spreadsheet, was set up so that we could print it out for teachers and be able to have them collect t-shirt sizes. Right. So in column H here, we collected all of the student t-shirt sizes. Okay. I'm going to slightly introduce some other things in here we could do with spreadsheets here for a moment. Remember that if you, whether using Excel or using Sheets, remember that when you click on a cell, you can look up here in the formula bar and you can see exactly what's going on in that cell. If I click in here, we're going to see that there's some funky stuff going on up in here. So you can see that we set out these columns here, A, B, C, D, E, and E. Hey, these follow the 4 rules of the spreadsheet, don't they? Right? ID, last name, first name, homeroom, room, what room are they in, and their student ID number. What we did is we wanted to put these pieces and parts together so that we could make this list a little bit more readable for a teacher. So what we did here is this is a term called concatenation, where we put multiple pieces of text together to make a larger string of characters. So called concatenating. And one of the ways you can do that is just with the AND operator, the ampersand. That is Shift 7 on your keyboard. So this is basically saying, go get me the value in B2 and a comma and a space and the value in C2 and an open parentheses and the value in D2. You kind of see we're building this larger string, little piece by piece. So that's all we did there, was to be able to just take these individual pieces of data and be able to make them into one cell. Okay, and I believe Father Mark put this spreadsheet together. Sorry. He did the same thing here, because I'll show you what that means in a second. Oops, sorry about that. Over here in column L, kind of off the side of the spreadsheet here, he has another little code that basically is trying to figure out what homeroom is the person in and what is their t-shirt size, right? So he did the same thing here with concatenation. This is a little small right now, but equals D2 and H2. So he's trying to pull in their homeroom and their t-shirt size together. This code is going to be important later on in a second. All right, so nothing crazy going on here. This particular tab on this spreadsheet was really just meant to collect the data, collect the information. Let me go into the notes section. Okay, so this is where we're trying to calculate how many of each spreadsheet, each shirt size we need. And if you've been following, I'm trying to count things. I'll start here in this middle section here. I'm trying to count things that meet a condition, aren't I? I want to look for just smalls. So here you go. It's a COUNTIF function, right? I want you to look at a range of cells and only count cells that meet a criteria. The only funky thing we did here, I'll come back to students here in a second, H2:H939 there's the range of cells you want it to look for, and we're looking for whatever value is in A12. The value in A12 is S. So we're looking for, anytime you see an S, please count it. The only thing new that we're doing here is that this reference, H2 to H939, is not on this spreadsheet, it's on another spreadsheet. So here what you can actually do is, if you look at the bottom of the screen where we name the spreadsheets, right, you can actually say, go over to the Students tab down here at the bottom, go to the Students tab, and then on that tab, go to H2 to H939. So we're actually doing a formula on one sheet that references another sheet in the spreadsheet. So that's just the new part about this, but this is just a COUNTIF function, right? So if I go back on that spreadsheet, if I go back over here, we're looking at column H, right? This whole thing is looking here in column H and trying to just count up the number of smalls, mediums, larges we find, right? So that's just a COUNTIF function, that's all. We also overorder. We order a couple of extra. So this larger function here is asking, please count the number of actual smalls we have on the sheet, and then add in whatever our extras that we decided. So take whatever's in B3 and add 10 more into there. Right? And this is basically the same formula here, just checking for each individual size. And then when I want to try to get a total, yep, you guessed it, we're just adding those values together with a sum function. That's it. Same thing down here. In this case, we're not doing it on the Students tab, we're doing it on the Faculty Staff tab. The faculty and staff get long sleeve t-shirts, so we're going to count them on the Fac Staff tab over here. And the same deal, go to this range of cells, look for a small, and add the couple of extras that we want there. Yeah, so this is just doing some COUNTIFs and some sums. And then let's look at the homeroom size summary. Right. So if you remember, this sheet was meant to be able to print out when we're trying to take piles of t-shirts and bag them together for each homeroom. Right. So I know that in homeroom 9-1, we had to send 2 smalls and 17 mediums and 10 larges and 2 extra larges. How did we do that? This is not a number. This is a formula. Okay. First, it's just a COUNTIF. Right? It's a COUNTIF. Now this is built into the middle of an if function, which we'll come back to in a second. First, I'm going to focus on this here. If COUNTIF, we're going to jump over to the Students tab, and in this case, we're going to look in column L. That's that, I'll switch over there to there for a second. That's that other code sitting over here. Right, if you see behind my face here. Oops, sorry about that. In column L, we kind of drew up that little shortcut code. This is so that we could actually count the shirts in the homeroom. That's why we came up with this 9-1 large versus a 9-3 large versus a 10-2 large. Okay, so we kind of developed this little code so that we could now count by homeroom. So what did Father Mark do here? He's doing, I want you to count on the Students tab in that column L code and find me anything that matches. If you look here, matches 9-2 small or 9-3 medium or something like that. Okay. What he's also doing here is kind of a little funky. Because this is an if function, if you see here for some of these homerooms, he's doing it so that we don't have zeros. If there are no extra larges in for homeroom, he doesn't want to put a 0 there. He just kind of wants to ignore it, so that we don't have more numbers on the spreadsheet than we need. So this function is saying if we count on the Students tab that code, and if the answer is 0, comma, what do we do if that's true? If you just put quote, quote, that's basically going to leave the cell blank. Okay, so here's the logical test. If the count on that homeroom size code equals 0, leave the cell empty. If it's not 0, I need you to just give me back the count. All right, you can do this. This is an if function. You know how to do this. So here's the logical test. What do I do if it's true? And then what do I do if it's false? That's it. Right? So that's the homeroom size function. So all of this information, here is the example of why we use spreadsheets to be able to collect information, organize information, and then do some summary and analysis on data. Right? So I told you, everything that we did on the spreadsheet, you can now do. You have the skills in order to do this. The other spreadsheet that we looked at was this NCAA bracket pool, if you remember this one. Now this takes a little bit extra formatting and some fancy style here, but at the end of the day, the logic behind it is pretty straightforward. It would take a little bit of time to build the actual bracket. There's not a lot of fancy things going on here in the bracket. Quite honestly, this is just text. So when you watch the game and you see that Virginia beat UNC Wilmington, you just come over here and you type in the name of the team that won. And when East Tennessee State upset Florida, you just put there. So this is really just keeping track of all of the teams in the bracket. All the real fancy stuff is going on in this other tab here. All right. So what's happening here? How is this all put together? So I don't know if some of you found in the other assignment, there's a function here called concatenate. Actually, in the last spreadsheet, I just showed you how to concatenate. They did it. We did it with just the ampersand, but there's also a method called concatenate, where you can take pieces of text together and put them into one string. So how is it knowing what teams are facing off? Well, it goes over to the bracket and pulls out, please give me the name of the team that's on the bracket tab in cell C8 versus the name of the team on the bracket tab in cell C10. So all of these matchups here are dictated by the bracket. Right? And to prove it to you, if I go in here and change this to Brooklyn College, if I change it to Brooklyn College, now this says Villanova versus Brooklyn, right? It's all dependent on what's going on in the bracket. Okay, easy enough, I think. The winner column, how do we know who won? So this is some interesting stuff going on here. Still, it's an if function, right? If you notice, it's either going to show you the name of the team who won, or it's going to show undecided if we haven't played that game yet. So if bracket D9, say in this case, remember it is not equal to empty. If cell D9 on the bracket sheet is not equal to empty, I want you to put in whatever is in cell D9. That, let's go back to the bracket. In cell D9, if you haven't entered the name of a team yet, if you have entered the name of a team, please grab the name of the team and bring it onto the next sheet. Right, so if the cell D13 is not empty, please put the name of the sheet. Otherwise, please type in there undecided. That's a pretty simple if test, I think, right? Not too much crazy going on here, right? If cell D13 on the bracket sheet is not empty, please put the name of the team there. Otherwise, write undecided. Okay. And then each player then does their pick. They pick what team they think is going to win, and then here's how we allocate you points. Great. If the team in D9 on the bracket side matches what you wrote here in E4, give you a point. Otherwise, give you 0 points. There you go. That's it. And then if I scroll all the way down to the bottom, my computer is unhappy for some reason, right? Here, when we want to add up how many points did you get in the different rounds, it's just a sum function. Just add up all the columns above it. That's it. And so we come all the way to the bottom of the spreadsheet. So this is totaling up all of the different grand totals of the tournament, and this is just going back to each individual cell in the spreadsheet where we had the other rounds and see what the totals are. So you can do all of this, folks. This just takes a little bit of extra work, but I think the logic behind all of this you guys can understand. So hopefully this is going to put a little bit of a bow, wrap up our discussion of functions. I have one more thing I want to talk about with spreadsheets, and then we'll move on. But you now know enough to work with functions in your spreadsheet. You know how functions work, you know how to put them together, and hopefully you have resources to be able to find and learn about other functions as you go along and as your needs change. So see, you can do all this. Even you can be fancy with spreadsheets.